It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Buongiorno tutti, this is Phil Ferguson, and of course, you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. I get a lot of emails, and I thank you for that, at least for the vast majority of them. And sometimes weird things come up where I get 2 or 3 emails on basically the same topic within a few days of each other after having not talked about it or been asked about it for months. And the one that's come up a couple of times here, just in the last couple of days, is how do I become a financial planner? And that's the emailer asking me. And or, Phil, how did you get started and how did you get to this place in your career? And I've told the origin story a couple of times. I think I've told it on the show, so I don't want to be too repetitive. So I'm going to cover that briefly. But when I went to my first year of college and came back, my dad sat me down and said, I want to show you about all the investments and where everything is at and how it all works in case something happens to him. This is my dad telling me if something happens to him, I could step in and know where everything was and how to take care of things. And I was very excited about this because I grew up knowing my dad was a stock picking genius because he would tell us. I mean, he wasn't too particularly boastful, but every once in a while we hear a story about a stock that doubled or tripled or went up 10 times. And so there was kind of this impression that he was doing a fantastic job picking stocks. And when he sat me down after this first year of college and we went through things, it became clear that he was not a fabulous stock picker. Matter of fact, he wasn't even good. In fact, he was terrible, or what I might call average. Stock picking is very, very hard to do. And he was doing research, and I remember growing up seeing him making charts, and this is pre-computer, but he'd have this great big graph paper, and he'd track charts, and he paid for subscription services that would mail you documents. I even read one of them a few months back about a company that he bought, and then it went in the toilet. But he was doing selection bias. And I don't know how much he had convinced himself or how much he was just telling stories to impress us, but we never heard the stories about the stocks that lost 90% or lost 95%. And I also jokingly tell a story that the most you can lose on a stock is 100%. So that's nice. You have a limit. There are investments or things you can do with money where you can lose more than you put up front, but with a stock you can't. Although even that my dad proved wrong because I found out that he owned Chrysler stock, and when Chrysler was about to go bankrupt, it fell dramatically and he sold it. And then they got a government bailout. For those of you who are 50 or older, you probably remember this. And the company was saved, so he bought the stock again. And then a year or two later, it turned out that the company wasn't saved and they still weren't going to succeed. And then they ended up getting bought out. But the stock fell again, and he sold it again at the bottom. So he ended up losing more than 100% of his investment because he bought and sold the stock twice. And so that's one of the potential downsides of day trading is that you can keep losing money on the same stock if you keep buying it high and selling it low. But, I had this, like I said, this gut feeling that he was a stock picking genius. And then the data showed me that he was not. And I was heartbroken. It was one of those points in time where you realize maybe your parents are normal humans. And it was for the good, but the stock picking ability wasn't there. And he had this one weird investment that was pretty much beating everything else. And it just kept growing. And it was the Vanguard S&P 500 Index Fund, which first launched in, I think, 74. And this story happened probably summer of '86, after my first year of college. So he had already owned this for several years. He wasn't one of the very first buyers, but he'd had it 4, 5, 6 years, and it was doing better than his other investments. And I thought, well, what the hell is this? So I was asking myself, how does one invest? What is the method? How does one make money? Because I don't know anything about that. And I was fascinated by this idea that I could make money from money versus money from physical labor. And that sounded like a pretty cool thing that I'd want to learn about. So I started reading books, getting education. I went to college. A lot of stories there for another time. I went to graduate school, got my MBA, learned more about finance, read a lot of books, and then just did the thing that most people do when they graduate in a recession. Got a job. I actually worked at a record store. That was fun. And worked my way up a couple different jobs, and I ended up in Montgomery Ward's in Chicago. I'm sure many of you remember Montgomery Ward's, and the day I got in the building, I realized this company was falling apart. But, I just got a new job, so I'm happy to have a paycheck for a while. And I would talk to coworkers. And my coworkers came to find out that I knew some things about investing. I would not have called myself an expert at that time, but I had some ideas and I had some thoughts. I was very favorable to the handful of index funds that were already available. And so people would ask me questions, and it's a good thing I have a podcast because I like to talk. I do like to hear the sound of my own voice, which is weird because this is kind of what I do for a living now. And one day, one of the ladies in the office, a few years older than me, and still a client today, like 20, 25 years later, she came up to me and she said, "Can I pay you?" And I said, pay me for what? And she said, "Well, you're giving me all this great investment advice. You're teaching me how to do money, how to make money in the stock market or with stocks. How to money is the phrase that I've stole, someone else said. And they wanted to pay me. And I said, I'm just helping out a coworker or a friend. This is just something I'm curious in. It's my hobby. Don't worry about it." And a second person said they wanted to give me money, and a third and a fourth. And I got to the point where I said, well, if all these people want to pay me money, I should probably find a way to get paid. And so I started a little company, and I did research, and I found out that I probably needed a Series 7 license. That's the broker's license, for those of you who are playing along with the scorecard of Series 7. And I studied for months and months and months, and then contacted the state of Illinois and said, "I'm ready to take this test. How do I sign up?" And they said, "Who is your sponsor?" What? Who is your sponsor? You have to have a sponsor. What does that mean, I have to have a sponsor? Nowhere in the test material did it tell you how to go and sign up for the test. It just told you how to succeed and pass the test. But you needed a broker-dealer to sponsor you. So I called a few local broker-dealers and said, "Would you be my sponsor?" And of course, they all laughed because they would have to sponsor me to then theoretically be their competition. And I would try to explain to them that I'm nobody, and I just have some friends that are paying me or want to pay me. Almost every state in the United States has what's called a de minimis rule, where if you're too small, you don't actually have to register. But that's usually like 3 or 5. Some states it's higher numbers, 10 or 20. Some states like Texas, you have to be registered to have a single client. So the rules are different by state, which is one of those annoying things in the world that we live in. But I couldn't take the Series 7, and I couldn't get someone to sponsor me. When I was talking to the employee at the state of Illinois in the Securities and Exchange Office, SEC office, I think it is, they said, well, you could always take the Series 65, but a lot of people don't want to take that test. I'm like, what is the Series 65? I said, well, the Series 65 is about 90% of the same stuff that you would be tested for in the Series 7, but to keep that license, you have to act as a fiduciary. And again, that wasn't really one of the things that I studied, and it's comical now to look back on that and think about how incredibly ignorant I was. But being a fiduciary, as I've talked about many times on the show, means that I would have to put the client's interest first. And I thought, isn't that what everybody does? Isn't that kind of the default for reality, that when someone pays you to be their professional representative, that you would do what's best for them. And it turns out, no. It's gotten more common now. Maybe 10 or more percent of financial advisors are fiduciary. Maybe it's bigger than that, and I've missed the big change. But when I started, it was like 98% were not fiduciary. It was not common. And still today, of course, the vast majority of people that call themselves financial advisors, people that give you advice for a fee, don't have to put your interest first. They can sell something to you that pays them a really big commission, and they may or may not even know that it's complete shit, but it doesn't even matter. They can know it's complete shit and get paid a 5 or 10 or 15% commission, and it's all okay for them to sell you shit because you signed a page at the end of the prospectus or the contract that said you understood all the information that was in there and it was disclosed to you, even though you didn't read it and you really have no idea. So I passed the Series 65 exam, and I was licensed, and now I could collect money from clients, and I made a few bucks. And, there's the annual expense of filing and refiling and re-registering and all those things. So the first couple of years, I just made a few dollars. And one of the single hardest things in the financial services industry, and I think this is the case in a lot of industries, is how do you get clients? Well, I had a day job all this time, at least in the beginning. And so anything that I made with my business was just extra. Anyone that wanted to hire me, I would be happy to help them. I would always tell people my ideas and my thoughts. I would give a talk to a group of people at a Rotary Club or a Kiwanis Club, and someone would come up afterwards and say, hey, can we set up a meeting and talk? And I said, okay. And it was so second class. I don't know. So poorly done. I had this pathetically simple 1-page contract kind of thing and really didn't know what I was doing. It's embarrassing to think about what I did 20 plus years ago. And as I slowly got bigger and bigger, I started to get more and more worried that maybe I wasn't doing something correctly. And the filing documents for the government, it's something like 30 pages of questions you've got to answer. And I would find myself researching the words used in the questions so that I could even try to answer them truthfully and correctly, because there's very specific words that have very specific legal meaning within the context of the registration or the annual re-registration. Now, whether this is good for the economy or good for business or good for government or good for the clients, it doesn't necessarily matter. Those are the rules. So you have to answer these questions truthfully. And again, as I got bigger and bigger, had a couple of audits from the state of Illinois. That was very educational. And at some point I got big enough where I hired an outside firm that's all they do is help people like me register. And so now I pay considerable money for them to help me each year make sure my registration is done correctly. And there have been new rules and added rules. And so getting started now would be a lot harder. But, that's kind of the origin story for Phil and Polaris Financial Planning and how that all happened. And it just grew slowly over time. And for most of the time, well, maybe more than half the time I've had my business, I also had a day job. I was very fortunate, had very nice, well-paying day jobs. But at one point, a boss and a coworker called me into a conference room where they had a HR representative on the phone, and they told me that I had to leave, and here's a box, literally physically handed me a box and paper to sign that I was told that I was unemployed, and I went and collected my stuff, and by the time I got back to my office, my computer was already locked. So they said, if you have any music or photos on the computer or anything that's personal, let us know where it's stored, and we can retrieve it and send you a disc, a CD. But I already knew better at that point to have nothing personal on the work computer, but I was locked out. I couldn't call any of the people that I normally worked with to say goodbye. I was just thrown out. Of course, then I'm looking for a new job, and I have a little more time and paid more attention to my business, and it started to grow a little faster. Kind of like geometrically. It had been really slow, and it grew faster and faster. And I had started going to atheist conferences, free thinkers, humanists, skeptic conferences, and I'd even started to table at some of them. And I thought, wow, if I table more, do I get more business? And it turned out that I did. The more people I saw, the more people I talked to, the more openly atheistic I became, the more clients I got from conferences, and a couple from this conference, and a couple from that conference. And it was right around this time period that it went from historically 3 to 4 to 5 national conferences, and that's all you had a choice to go to everybody everywhere, statewide, regional, citywide. People were having conferences. And I think my peak year several years ago, I went to 14 different atheist conferences, humanist, skeptics, whatever conferences. Almost all of them I was a sponsor. I had a table. I had an ad in the pamphlet, or I helped underwrite the conference. Some of them I spoke at, some of them I didn't. A lot of them I stood at my table, and the business just kept growing and growing. I did a podcast with some friends. I had my own podcast for a while, and then I ended up working with Smalley on Dogma Debate for a while. And then, of course, I launched later The Phil Ferguson Show, which, of course, has now been going for years. And it seemed like everything I did just brought more and more clients. And I have a very luxurious position with the podcast because people will listen to the podcast and they understand and know my philosophy and my thought process, and then they can call and hire me. If someone listens to my show and thinks that it's all bullshit, well, they don't call me, and that's fine. They've already decided not to be interested, so it doesn't take any effort or time for me. But the people that listen and understand and get what I'm trying to do, that they understand what I'm sharing, they understand the philosophy of the index funds and rebalancing and buying low and selling high, dollar cost averaging, the granularity and the clarity that I talk about in the model that I use, and how you can know what percentage of your money is in bonds at any day, what percentage is in small cap versus large cap, what's domestic versus international, what's in real estate versus international small cap versus mid cap growth in the United States. People like to know what they own, and a lot of advisors will sit you down and pick out 10 or 12 different stock funds that do all kinds of 10 or 12 different weird things. And when people give me statements from other companies and I say, what percentage of your holdings are bonds? They might say, well, I think it's 30%. But a lot of their stock funds own bonds. And so it might be 50 or 60%, and they just didn't even know it. And it might be great that it's set up that way, but they didn't even know what they owned. So that's kind of how it started. Now, if you want to become a financial advisor, and this goes directly into the emails that people are sending me, it's a very hard thing to get into. Almost all positions are available in a large company where maybe they either want you to be an assistant, and you would have to study to get either your Series 7 or the 65 or some other ones if you wanted to sell insurance, or they asked you to sell insurance, and you have to study that while you're helping them. And it's an entry-level position. It might pay a draw, which you have to pay back while you earn commissions, or it might pay you a salary or a combination of the two. There is always the possibility that you can find a smaller private business that maybe is somebody like me, but not me, because I am not hiring anybody ever again. I've done that in industry. I'm over that. But some local investment advisor that is a fiduciary, they might have themselves and another person who's an advisor, and they're looking for a third or fourth or fifth advisor. And they might take you on if you know them, if you interview with them, if they're actively seeking. You can help them out while learning about and passing the Series 65 and then working for them. You could also just go and start your own business. At any point in time, anyone can do this in any state. And what you would need to do is, of course, sign up for, study, and pass the Series 65. You'd have to do that. You'd have to create a company, which you can do on your own, but I strongly recommend that you get an attorney to help you. You should have a tax professional to help you decide which kind of company you should set up, and there's different reasons for different companies, and this is not my expertise, so get a professional, tax professional, and a legal professional. And so then you have your license, you have your business, and setting up a business can be anywhere from several hundred to a couple of thousands of dollars. And then you would want to find a company that helps you set up your RIA, Registered Investment Advisor. Your company would become the Registered Investment Advisor. you as the employee or owner become an investment advisor representative. I know it's a bunch of fancy word soup, but that's how the government works. And some of these companies have turnkey operations, which mean you sit down with them or you meet them over the phone or Zoom in today's modern world with Skype. And for a fee, they'll prep and help you register with the government. They'll help you get all the forms and applications and contracts and all the stuff that you need. And they will literally provide everything turnkey, but it might be $6,000, $10,000, $12,000, and it might take you months. And again, all of this originally I did on my own because I didn't know any better, and I had no money, and I had time. But today I wouldn't do that. I'd hire a company like this. So I'd hire an attorney to make a company. I'd hire an accountant to make sure I was doing everything correctly there. And I would hire one of these firms. The one I use is RIA Consultants, and I've actually had an employee of theirs on, so full disclosure there. I would recommend them. I do recommend them, but I don't have any other reference points. So there may be better, but they've always been good to me. So I like them. But yeah, that's how you could do it. You could just go poof and start, and maybe 8 to 15 grand. You have a business, you are registered, you're legal, and that's all cool, but you have no clients. And how do you get clients? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you have a lot of friends and you end up calling them just like the thing you didn't want to do when you worked for somebody else, because that's how you get money. You cold call or warm call, all your friends and family. I don't know how one does that from scratch. For me, it was very organic, and I had a day job, so it could grow over time without me being in the position where I ever really had to sell the business or sell my ideas. I just would cast them out into the wind, all of my ideas, and every once in a while, a small percentage of the people that hear my ideas would come to me and say, "That sounds pretty good. I want to pay you." And still to this day, I am honored and delighted and surprised, because I do pretty much tell everything in this podcast, what I do and how I do it, but people still call and want to hire me. And those are the people that say, "I get it, Phil. I understand it. It sounds good. I don't want to do it." Just like I pay someone to change the oil on my car. I guess I could do that if I really wanted to. I don't want to. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to mess with it. Mechanical things, I understand them, but I don't enjoy working on them. And there are people that love doing that, love building a house, because you can, at the end of the day, look at something and say, "I did that." Where a lot of jobs, you don't get that satisfaction. You can't, it's just like another day in the grind. You another day survive and another day with a paycheck, but you can never point to anything that you built and show somebody else. I could see building a house, and even 30, 40, 50, 100 years later, people can go look at that and say, "You built that." But you know what? Every job has its pluses and minuses. And for me, sitting at home in my little home office, talking to really fascinating people all day, sometimes literally every day for hours and hours on end, is awesome. If you don't like talking on the phone, this is going to be a problem for you. If you don't like finding ways to make connections with people and find things that you share in common, this may not be a job for you. It's not going to work over text or over tweet or Facebook or even with a nice web page. I don't think I've ever acquired a client because of my web page. I have had a few people that heard about me, went and looked and said, "Oh, he has a web page. He must be legitimate." But to my knowledge, no one's ever looked at the web page. Now, maybe if I had, looked at the web page and then hired me, maybe if I had a much better web page. But there's legal and regulatory problems with web pages in the financial services industry, because you can't just promise things, and on a web page, it's problematic. Anyway, so that's some of the story of where I came from, and some of the story of how you could be an advisor and what it would take. Basically, it just takes some time and some money, and you passing the Series 65. And within a few months from hearing this, you could be a financial planner. Now the question is, can you actually make money at it? Can you get clients and have them pay you? And can you bring in enough funds to cover your registration? And, if you have a day job that allows you some freedom at night and weekends, maybe you can do that, because that's what I did for a long time. This is the first time in my life that I've had one job. And it's my business because I've been doing it, I think it's about 24 years now. But I often had my business, I often had a day job, and I often had where I was DJing weddings. That's a whole other story. But I'm very used to working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. That's just kind of what I do. I don't watch sports ball. A friend just told me that they're still distraught because there's no sports. I didn't even know really that there wasn't sports because I didn't know there was sports before the coronavirus thing. Anyway, if you have questions or want to know more about this or get links or specific ideas via email, or you'd like to talk a little bit about starting your own business, I can help a little. I'm happy to do that. You can email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and we're going to take a little break and go on with the rest of the show.
My father, the man responsible for my education, taught me that Islam, rightly understood, is a religion and philosophy of peace. In fact, he said that for any society to be peaceful and prosperous, it had to institute the rule of God, or Sharia. I came to disagree with my father. It was a gradual process that started when I entered and lived in societies such as the Netherlands and the United States that applied man-made constitutions and laws. Both countries are peaceful and prosperous. I now disagree even more with my father that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the amount of security that is deployed tonight here, the amount of security that is deployed for the Richmond Marathon. 6 months ago, the Boston Marathon was bombed by two brothers who invoked the founding documents and the founding father of Islam. I disagree with my father when I look at the wanton killing of the Westgate Mall in Nairobi by Somali men invoking Allah and Muhammad to justify their horrid act. Kenya is the most hospitable country to Somalis fleeing their own country, so it distresses me even more. I disagree with my father when I look at the reports this week of 30 men and women worshipping in Iraq who are killed by a suicide bomber invoking the very same God and the very same prophet that they invoke. I disagree with my father when he says that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the 120,000 dead in Syria, Syria is now a stage of a proxy war between Islam's two most important and most influential nations, the Sunni Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Shia Islamic Republic of Iran. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read about the almost daily reports of the destruction of churches, the pillaging of Christian property, the rape of Christian women, the terrible exodus of Christians and other religious minorities from Muslim countries. All this is done by men who invoke the founding father and founding documents of Islam. I disagree with my dear beloved father when I read about the teenage girl in Pakistan who's shot point blank in the head by a man invoking Allah and Muhammad because she wanted education. In the name of Allah and Muhammad, women are forbidden to drive. They're forbidden to own their own reproductive rights. They're forbidden to do anything unless they have permission from a male guardian. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read these founding documents and I study the history and the example of the Prophet Muhammad. In there, I find an insistence of war and intolerance towards infidels, the hypocrites, those who associate God with others, homosexuals, women, and so on.
This Investing Skeptically segment is on job creators. Just something I've seen a lot lately when we've talked about giving people money back or rebating taxes or putting money into the economy. I will always see, and I don't doubt that this will ever change, but people will say, don't give it to the poor people, give it to rich people. They're the job creators. This is wrong. This cannot be more wrong than the way it's expressed, and it's heartbreaking that so many people do not understand money, finance, economics. So if you find somebody that is barely getting by or worse, they are working hard, they're making money, but it's not enough, they have 2 jobs, they're a single parent, they have kids, whatever the problems are, and these things are definitely serious challenges to work through. If you give that person $1,000, it's really easy to figure out what they're going to do with it. They're going to spend it. Maybe they pay down a credit card. Maybe they buy some shoes. Maybe they buy some groceries. Maybe it helps them make a payment for their gas bill or heating or air conditioning, whatever, but they're going to spend that money. Now, what happens when you give $1,000 to a person that already has millions of dollars? What are they going to do with it? Well, maybe they spend it, but maybe they just add it to their investment portfolio. And maybe if everybody that had extra $1,000 invested it into their portfolio, that could push the stock market up. The stock market is not the economy. The stock market going up doesn't help that person that needed $1,000. Of course, you can give $1,000 to a rich person. They might just put it in the bank. And maybe that can be loaned against. But companies will not make more product and stock will not go up in the long run if no one can buy their stuff. I recently saw someone had a post that said, rich people make things that poor people want to buy. Well, okay, maybe some of the times, but some of the times it's a person makes something that another person wants to buy. And if they're really good at doing that, maybe they do become a rich person by adding value to something so someone else pays them more for it, pays them for their time and their effort. And of course, they can hire employees to magnify that effort. And that's often how people become rich, that and inheritance. And of course, if someone is rich through inheritance, they're not creating any jobs anyway. They already have all the money they want or need. Another thought is that high tax rates hurt people who run companies, so they're going to hire less people. This is also false. A company will hire people, at least theoretically, when additional people will make them additional profits. So if I have to hire someone for $50,000 and that incremental job will bring in $40,000 of revenue to the company, in the short term at least, I'm losing money and I'm disinclined to do that. Now, if I have a strategic plan and I think if I hire enough people making $50,000 and it only brings in $40,000, at some point in the future, those jobs will bring in $100,000 of revenue to the company. One could still choose to do that. And of course, it's always much, much more difficult and muddy than this. But if you run a company, you hire new people because you think that at the end of the day, at the end of the year, the amount of money you're paying that person in wages and benefits and health insurance and Social Security payments, all the money that you're going to spend brings you more back as a company from a purely, not social, but from a purely financial standpoint. If you think that adding an employee will cost you more expense than you're ever going to make from having that employee, you won't hire that employee. One thing you may have noticed that's not part of this equation is the tax rate that you pay on the profits as the owner of the company. If you pay 20% profit for your business, or 40% or 80%, that's not part of the equation. Rich people don't generally say, I'm done. I'm going to stop making money because my tax rates are too high. No, what they generally do is bitch and moan about it and then buy off some politicians so their tax rates go down. but it doesn't affect their hiring decisions as much as it's led to believe. Because even if the tax rate is 80%, hiring a new person that makes more revenue, more profit for the company than the wages and benefits paid, the company is likely to do that still, even if a good chunk of the profits go to the government. Now, all that being aside, I think that companies should not pay taxes. That's a whole nother long story that I've talked about. But in short, the company should not pay taxes. But whenever it distributes money through stock appreciation, stock dividends, or bond dividends, or wages, that's where the taxes should be. And then, of course, we follow the basic rule of without taxation, there can be no representation. And I don't think companies should have representation in our government. People should have representation. Sorry, that's a whole nother rant that I've done before. But just wanted to talk about taxes and refunding money a little bit. And again, in short, if you give someone who is barely getting by $1,000, they're more likely to spend it. They're much more likely to stimulate the economy. And if demand for goods goes up, companies will adapt and make more of those goods, which might include hiring more people to make those goods. If you give a rich person $1,000, maybe they spend it just like the poor person would, but maybe they don't. It could have a positive pressure on the upside to the stock market, but it doesn't necessarily mean they buy any more stuff. They already have what they want. They go buy whatever they want whenever they want. Money is not really that big of a concern for them. And I'm not begrudging them, and maybe I'm in that category. I don't know. You decide. But it doesn't necessarily mean they go spend it. So if your goal is to stimulate the economy, you give money or refunds or rebates or whatever credits you want to do to people that don't have any excess funds, because they will spend all of it, and that will have the most significant effect in the short run, in a quick way, on the economy. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investment should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, next up I have Gayle Jordan. How are you?
Phil, I'm good. I'm so glad to be with you.
Yeah, we're gonna jump in like we know each other.
Sure.
You live in Tennessee.
I do.
And you've been involved with some secular stuff.
I have.
And you've actually helped organize conferences, which I'm assuming in 2020 there is not one.
There is not one. There is not one. We hope to resume NanoCon, which is the Nashville conference, in 2021.
That was it scheduled for 2020?
No, they had actually they had taken a short hiatus. The folks that were putting it together, they were thinking about doing something in the fall, but I believe all of that's just put off till 2021.
Yeah, that's such a heartbreaker, and it's such a needed thing in your area, and it's so much fun.
Isn't it? Isn't it so
is.
much fun? Yeah, I have found that of all of the things with the virus, of all of the things, I have missed our cons. Oh, have I missed seeing our people.
Yeah, that is kind of rough. Sometimes I'll think about all the people I can't see during this year, and the only thing that's worse, and it's close, but it's a little worse. I can't go to Italy.
Oh no, I'm sure you had a trip planned this year.
We were going to go in April and come back after the first week of May. We had intentionally planned our trip to be in the city of Rome on May 4th, because may the 4th be with you. Mm-hmm. Rome is very big on Star Wars.
Italians, it's going to be a big celebration.
Yeah, we were there by accident on May 4th many years ago, and we haven't been able to get back. And they had, by the Coliseum, Wookiees and stormtroopers and all kinds of people in costumes. They even had spaceships. They had mock-ups of like X-Wings and TIE fighters and stuff.
Oh, will you try to reschedule for May the 4th next year?
Yeah. Well, I'll think about it. I just I'm worried that maybe Italy will have it under control by then. But I don't know that we're going to.
They were hit hard initially, but most of the European countries are in such better shape than we are.
They are. I think there's certain things about Americans that have actually been a big benefit a lot of the times. The can-do attitude, the I'm never going to lose, I'm going to keep fighting, past the time that I don't really have a chance.
Sure.
Because sometimes you win that way. And the arrogance and the attitude and you can't tell me what to do. And a lot of that stuff, that part of that American machismo, I don't know, the American attitude has helped a lot of ways make the country as great as it is, but the virus doesn't give a shit about that.
Right.
And us saying screw you to the scientists and the politicians and people going to conferences, and I just had that thing in Arizona where 3,000 young people packed into a church. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you knew this, but the people who run the church said they installed a new ventilation system that kills 99.9% of all coronavirus.
I was very snarky and ugly about that on Twitter. I had something to say about that.
And it's funny because you can actually kill virus in the air. It's not impossible. For example, you could fill the entire space with chlorine gas.
Right.
But that would
you could do that.
That would kill the people. You could use ultraviolet lights at such an intensity that it would actually rupture the cells. Unfortunately, it also ruptures skin and eye and liver cells. So that I don't know. It just. And to think that church, coincidentally, a member of that church is the one who invented it. It was just, like I said, my usual snark. Yeah, when they said that, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, no, they didn't. But, maybe they created a box and sold it to them for $50,000 and it's got a fan inside.
Right.
That'd be the kind of thing that they'd buy.
And the sad part is, there are people, this is the church leadership. And of course, I have a big chip on my shoulder about, tell me again how harmless religion is. This was the church leadership saying that. And there is no question in my mind that there were people in attendance who leaned into believing those pastors. There's no doubt in my mind they did that.
Yeah. And the thing is that everyone was close. There was nowhere else to go, unlike the thing in Tulsa where people, luckily, almost nobody went. So you could spread out.
You could see people doing that up way in the blue.
But of course they're getting riled up with Trump's awful, horrific way of making a virus racist, and people are screaming and yelling and cheering, and the louder you are, the farther you're projecting not just your voice but droplets from your mouth.
Right.
So
it was a toxic combination, literally a toxic combination.
Well, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Nothing happens. But we just found out from friends of friends that some small town by where we used to live, the high school students got together and had an unofficial prom. And apparently there were 50 students at this house party.
Oh, no.
And there's now, I don't know if it was a week or two ago, because it's just something I've heard through the grapevine. There's at least 15 confirmed cases, and they think that pretty much everybody who was there is going to end up with it. And the real problem, of course, is all these college seniors, former college seniors, went home from that party infected and didn't show any symptoms for days or a week or two. And that means their parents and their siblings, and if they went to grandparents and Labor Day and
and the sad thing is, this is knowledge we've had now for months. That there's nothing has changed with what we learned early on, which is it's highly contagious and it's very deadly. And so you just what a mess. Well, we are in such a mess.
The one thing that I guess I'm happy I learned is that it's not anywhere near as contagious by touch or from surfaces as we thought originally.
That's a little good news.
It's still very contagious. I mean, if someone who is ill touches something and you're right behind them and touch it next, okay, you can pick it up and then end up touching your face. But a cardboard box that gets delivered by Amazon, as we have a little quarantine area where when they bring something, and of course they'll ring the doorbell and we'll just wave and like, just sit it down. They'll put it on it when they're in the van. I open the door and I put it in this little side area, and we spray Lysol in the general area. And then I go in and I wash my hands briskly, and then I leave it there for a day or something before I open it. But,
Right. And we had been wiping down our groceries when they got delivered. And what we have learned is that contact risk is, as you said, is nowhere near as great as we thought it was initially. Yeah. So that's a little bit of good news.
We still do, but we've toned it down a lot because we had like this really complicated protocol with gloves and crossing the threshold. So we bring everything in now, and then one person unbags it as the other person washes their hands, and only one person goes to the store because you don't need two people, rolling the dice at the same time.
Good point.
One person takes things out of the bag, and then we just have a washcloth with a little bit of soap water in it, and like a cereal box. You just wipe the cereal box and you put it away.
Sure.
You wipe it out because the soap breaks down the wall of the cells. So, anyway, enough fun stuff about that crap. I didn't even think we'd talk about that, but it's kind of where we are today.
It's in the news. It's timely.
So, Gayle, what do you do?
I do a lot of things, but I think in the context of your question, I'm the executive director of Recovering from Religion.
And if I recall correctly, you also ran for a public office. Is that in the past?
Ran for Tennessee State Senate 2 times. I ran in 2016 and in 2018.
And you got some kind of really cool moniker, right?
I did. The lieutenant governor of the state of Tennessee, in a tweet that he put out right after we released our campaign video, called me the most dangerous woman in Tennessee, the most dangerous woman he had seen in his 40 years of politics.
That's awesome. You should win just because of that.
It's the best. Yeah. I know. I don't know how to fit that on a license plate.
That is fantastic. So, Recovering from Religion, you had mentioned that. Give us some detail. What does it do? What's the point? And where can people send money?
Sure. Recovering from Religion is so straightforward, Phil. It explains itself almost by the name of it. Our mission statement is very straightforward. We provide hope, healing, and support to those who are struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief. And that, of course, is broad spectrum. And folks come to us. We have a 24-hour telephone a telephone hotline. We have a 24-hour internet chat. We have an online community. We have local support groups, which are meeting online currently, but we'll resume meeting together when it's safe to do so. Everything that we do, every project that we begin, every development that we add, we do to try to answer the question, how can we help to those folks who are anywhere on the spectrum of doubt and non-belief? Very
good. Well, that sounds easy. So, you get anything from grandma calling up to a little child that's scared and in the closet, literally, physically, because they don't want their parents to hear. Is that true?
Oh,
I think I've heard these stories.
Yes, from every corner of the world. We're international. We're global because we're internet based. From every religion, we have the spectrum of the circumstances. We call it, we take our clients anywhere from when the ground first becomes soft beneath their feet in their security and believing what they have been taught, to a lifetime atheist who may just be struggling with some relic of religion that has come up in their lives, and we'll take them wherever we can get them. We provide peer support on our telephone hotline. We provide the same peer support in our internet chat. It's identical. It's just your preference of how you'd like to talk to one of our trained agents who are standing by 24 hours a day.
And if I recall correctly, it's not a conversion thing, right? It's just
a
voice that you can talk to somebody.
That's right. We're careful about that because we market ourselves within religious communities, and we hope to provide resources. We provide a judgment-free place to ask your questions. Sometimes, as a religious person, you don't even have a place to ask the questions. It's not even that you're ready to leave religion or that your doubts are bad. You just don't really understand how it all comes together. And religion tends to give a party line. And so when they come to us and ask a question, we try to provide resources. Our resources are full of and our resource tab is public, by the way, but our resources are full of websites and books and videos and podcasts that might address the issue that you seem to be, struggling with at this point. So we are not in the business of trying to tell people, just take the next step. You can drop that belief. Just take the next step. We just take them where they are. What's troubling you today? Well, I have this lingering fear of hell. I really don't believe in it, but it's when I put my head on my pillow and I close my eyes, it kind of gets in my head, and I'm wondering what to do about it. And so we'll talk about it. We'll ask questions. We'll get the person to try to reflect on why do they think it might be bothering them, and what options do they see and how they can manage this. And then we may provide them a video or a podcast that might be helpful to them.
I love it. It's just one of those things that I know it can be so hard, and there might even be people listening to this show that have questions or doubts, and they just need to talk to somebody. I'm assuming they can call as well.
Sure, absolutely. And as I said, it's a telephone line. It's 1-844-I-DOUBT-IT. Or just recoveringfromreligion.org is the website. And right there on every page of our website is the little green chat bubble. And there are agents standing by ready to have a chat.
And if someone wants to help, I'm assuming the two main things they could do is get trained and actually take calls or throw you some money.
Absolutely. Both of those things we welcome with open arms. Our volunteer tab is across the top of the page. We have training. We will get you up to speed so that you don't have to take a call or a chat until you're ready. We also have some sub areas that you could help with if you really don't. Our largest need is agents, both telephone agents and chat agents, but we have some other things, working with the blog maybe, or working with our social media. There's a lot of places we can plug you in if that is not your thing. And our donate tab is at the top. We are a 100% volunteer organization, from me to Daryl, the president and founder of Recovering from Religion, to our newest trained volunteer. It's an entirely volunteer organization. Almost every one of us does this because we've been there. We've experienced what it's like to need a listening ear, a compassionate person to bounce some things off of. Not everyone. We have some volunteers who have not experienced religion, and they're still kind and thoughtful and patient. But most of us have come from that somewhere on the spectrum of wishing that this resource had been available to us when we were in the darkness before the light of the doubting of the faith.
Yeah, I did that whole thing when I was about 13, and it wasn't that rough, and my parents were Methodist anyway, and they just said it was a phase, and
it's lasted a while.
Yeah, it's a long phase. Yeah, and that was about it. It wasn't really a thing, but I know for a lot of people it's not anywhere close to that easy, and it's really hard, and it can be hard if you're young because you're dependent on your family, and maybe not intentionally, because I'm going to assume that the parents mean well. If a parent is convinced that if you're not a believer, you're going to burn and you're going to be tortured, it would actually be a logical step for them to try to motivate you to stay in the faith. Unfortunately, a lot of parents aren't equipped to be parents because they had no training. I know I learned a lot of things on the process that would have been really nice to know that shit in advance. So it's difficult, it's challenging, but most people are well intended, but not everybody. And if you're young and dependent, it's rough, and maybe you can find a voice to talk to, and it makes a difference. And of course, some of my listeners have money, and so maybe they can go to your website and donate a few bucks. What else is going on in your world?
In my world, what else is going on? Well, I'll tell you that Recovering from Religion has responded to the virus. We, as I mentioned earlier, we have these local support groups, and of course, it was the first thing to go. You can't meet in groups like that, and so we suspended. We have about 46 support groups in cities across the country and across the world, actually. We had to suspend those meetings immediately. That was in March that we did that. But we still saw a need. Our people still needed in fact, a lot of our people needed it even more, because now they're really isolated. Now the very few friends that they may have had that they could speak with, they're isolated from. So we did a little experimenting. We were light on our feet, and we have come up with what we have called RFRX, a prescription for coping. It's kind of a play on words.
I like it.
RFRX, a prescription for coping. We have these sessions on Monday nights. There's always a program. There's a structured program, and we've had guests from across the spectrum from the secular universe, so to speak. Most of our presentations have been by members of the Secular Therapy Project. They are licensed therapists, and they have been willing to come on, and they make a short presentation. Sometimes Dr. Ray, of course, Daryl led one about what our minds do when we're in crisis, what our the response that we have, the physiological response, and what our brains do when we're under threat. And that was an interesting session. And we've had multiple sessions about coping with stress and dealing with the isolation of the virus, and it has been wonderful. So we have transformed we started with offering it to the members of our support groups, and then we opened up to the members of our online community, and now we've opened it up to the public. We have, with the donations of people who share our vision, we have expanded our Zoom subscription, and we're able to house hundreds of people that come and listen to our Monday night RFRX. You can find all the information about it both on our webpage and on our social media. And it has been, we have a session. We have an opportunity for the attendees to ask our guests questions. So we have a question and answer session. And then, Phil, we have a thing where we stop the recording, because we post these on YouTube afterward, but we stop the recording and we unmute the mics, and we have a social hour. And our social hour has gone 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 hours long. We have made a commitment that as long as they want to stay on,
Sure.
we'll have a volunteer to monitor that. And sometimes it's loud and it's kind of chaotic because everybody's talking, and other times it's quite serious. And so it has been so gratifying for us to be able to respond in a way that we knew we could help. We knew that we couldn't meet in our support groups, but this is the thing we can do. And we've done it every Monday night at 7:00 Central. If you'll tune into our Zoom, which you can find information for, again, as I said, at our website or in our social media, and join us for our RFRX.
You need some kind of virtual talking stick. Because some organizations, people
I
are...
wonder if Zoom have thought about that. That would be sort of a Zoom feature.
I haven't seen it. And matter of fact, I can't figure out how to Zoom in or out with my camera in Zoom. And of course, Googling that doesn't really work, or it's not an option, because as soon as you say, how do you Zoom in Zoom, it just takes you to zoom.com, and I'm like, no, that's not what I want. Oh shit.
I don't know how you say that any other way.
Yeah, it's weird. So I had to break down, because I'm doing more and more stuff with video, unlike this call. I put some acoustic foam behind me, because it looks all cool. Like,
very cool.
Makes me look like I'm a professional.
You are a professional. How's everything with you? I guess I'm not supposed to do that on a podcast, but how's everything with you?
Oh, it's fine. People do hear a lot of things about me. Like I said, everyone in our family is safe. We do know a couple of people that have been infected and officially diagnosed and or tested. So it has touched a little bit the really weird thing. And this is, and I'm going to kind of pause, because I haven't talked about this yet. So you actually touched on something. I have had about 5 of my clients that have a relative, usually a parent, someone who's a grandparent. 5 different of my clients have had someone in their family die from COVID. So it's interesting. I was out doing yard work, and I think my neighbor across the street is a hardcore Fox News watching guy, and he came over and talked to me from a respectable distance. And he said, so do you actually know anyone that's died? And I said, yes, I do. And he just had this look like, oh, fuck. They didn't teach me what to do when that happens, because most people probably say no. Most people, right. Because thankfully, even though we've had a lot of people infected, it's a very small portion of the population. And thankfully, most people do get better. And there's some discussions about what potential long-term damage to lungs and other organs might be. But most people do live through it. It's still horrible. I don't want to be sick for 10 days. I don't think that sounds good to me at all.
At all.
and I'm officially pre-diabetic, and I'm fat, and those aren't good things to have with a breathing disorder or a lung infection or something. So,
No.
but yeah, it's kind of saddening that way. But it's one of those things that, because of my job, when I get enough clients, it's kind of one of those things. Like now, every year, and I think this year it's been 2 people, have been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so I'm not just the financial advisor. I'm kind of there a little bit for emotional support to tell them that here's how much money you're going to be able to have after he or she is gone, and that's rough. But yeah, I didn't think so much about that when I was much younger, and of course my clients were probably younger. But we all keep getting older. But yeah, I would sure like a conference to go to. I know a lot of the groups, and it's a good thing that you guys are doing this too, are having some things where people can connect.
Sure.
So anyone that's listening, if you're just kind of lonely, bored, and don't know who to talk to, go join. What is it? The RFRX?
RFRX, a prescription for coping. And it's on Monday nights at 7 o'clock Central.
7 o'clock Central. And where do they find it? On Facebook? Just Google it?
They can find it on, on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, and on our webpage. And the prior sessions have all been recorded, and those are located at our Recovering from Religion YouTube channel. You know how it's YouTube/Recovering from Religion. And all of our prior sessions can be found there.
Is it okay if someone just doesn't want to be seen or known and they can put in a fake name?
Of course they can, and of course it's Zoom, and if they've got any familiarity with Zoom, you can download the app or you can use it in your browser, and before you come in, it will ask you that. It will ask you if you want, number one, if you want your camera on. You can opt to have your camera off. There's a feature that you always come into the room muted. That's the control side of it. Yes, you come in muted, and then you can choose to display a name, whether it's your name or not, who cares, and you can choose whether or not to have your camera on. So you've got all kinds of autonomy on being able to participate and listen and be part of it. And there's also in Zoom, there's a chat. And so while the presentation's going on, there's a little bit of a chat going on in the side, so you can participate in that as well. So it's it's been a pretty cool feature for us to, it's accommodated well what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, I know I've done group videos on Skype and some other platforms, and it works. Zoom's pretty nice. I do think they need to amp up some of the functions. Like I should be able to zoom in and out if my camera allows it, which it does, and I can do it from Skype or I can do it from the app. And so what I normally have to do is fix it and then go in and zoom, and it just takes whatever I was using last time. But if I want to change it, I'm like, oh shit, I can't.
Really?
Because I think once I turn the camera off and then go open up the app for the camera, I can change it and then close that and then turn it back on. But that's kind of annoying. But
yeah, I'm surprised that they haven't expanded those features. How in under pressure, those they tend to respond pretty quickly to what the demand is. So I'm surprised that they haven't accommodated that. It's
not a big deal. It's just like I use Audacity to record podcasts, and every once in a while it updates. And they do something stupid.
I thought you were going to say do something clever.
Well, they probably do that too. But I use very, very, very few of the functions that are in Audacity because it can do a lot of things. And the one thing that they keep doing with updates is they will turn back on by default when they update. Even though I've turned it off, they will turn on the auto adjust for volume, and so. If I'm too quiet, it suddenly jumps me up and I get too loud, or if I'm too loud, it makes me too quiet. And I know what I'm doing. I'm speaking the volume that I'm speaking for a reason, and I don't want the system just to randomly decide I'm too quiet.
Don't help me.
Yeah, stop doing that. So I always have to keep turning that off a couple times a year. It's kind of annoying, but life's not so bad. Anything else you've got for us?
Well, let's see. I am in the process. Well, it's a little bit premature for me to say it. I've been talking about it for so long, though. It's not a secret to anybody who knows who I am. I'm in the process of trying to relocate myself out to the West Coast. My children grew up in Tennessee, my 4 adult children, and they'll never come back. Tennessee was good to us. It's a beautiful place, an absolutely beautiful state, and it was a good place to raise children, such as it was.
Were you going to move to Vegas?
I'm not moving to Vegas. I have a daughter in Vegas,
I
but
know
I'm
you
not
do.
moving to Vegas. I'm moving to the Pacific Northwest. I have a son who is a public defender in Washington State, and he's lobbying for his state. I have a daughter who's the executive director of a nonprofit, and she's in Eugene, Oregon, and she's lobbying for her state. And my law license is a California law license, so I'm sort of looking in Northern California too. Anyway, so I'm closer than I was earlier to making that happen. I've had my house on the market all spring, and I think we are getting close to a deal.
Because you have a really good backyard for a cookout fire pit kind of thing.
And if I
can't use it.
scoop up this little 8 acres and take it with me, I would. This is the lifestyle that I'll create out there.
Yeah.
But yes, this farm has been. I raised my kids on this farm, so it's bittersweet. I'm ready to go, but I have wonderful memories here, and not just of raising the children, but of having gatherings here. And I even call my farm and my house Free Thought Farm and Free Thought Cottage, because there's been a place of joy and love and a place to gather. We've had our local secular group here. We've had the Nashville secular group multiple times. I think you've been out here a few times.
A couple of times. Absolutely delightful. And does Tennessee have an income tax?
Tennessee does not have a state income tax. Now, neither does Washington State. So you factor that in as you're trying to make your decision about where you're going to go.
I'm thinking more about it because Illinois used to be 3 and then went to 5, and now it's up to 8.
Ooh, yikes.
And so it starts to add up, and I can be almost anywhere. I've got a lot of family and relatives here, so it's probably not going to happen now, but I'm kicking it around, and I thought Tennessee had gone down 1% or more a year for a while, and it's now 0. And Vegas, and you said Washington?
Washington State does not have a state income tax.
Yeah, I know after my visit to Seattle, I know not everywhere in Washington State is Seattle. So I get that, but I cannot live on the ocean side of the mountains because it rains.
It's just too much. So
every
that's funny
fucking day.
My kid, who has just become a public defender, is just on the east side of the mountains, and of course that puts you in the sunshine and the heat. And there's no question. There's never going to be a perfect place, and it's a trade-off for what it is, whatever it is you're looking for. But yeah, it's tough out there on the west side of the Cascades.
Yeah, and of course on the east side it can get really dry, like chapped lips, hot and dry. Surprisingly so. What is it? Bend, Oregon? Is that?
Bend is, yes, it's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
It's on the east side of Cascades, and it can be hot and dry.
Very good. Well, Gayle, how can people reach you or chat with you or invite you to be a speaker, assuming we have conferences again someday?
Well, someday we're going to have conferences again. My email address is real easy to remember. If you remember the org, it's gayle@recoveringfromreligion.org. And if that's the website, recoveringfromreligion.org, everything is there. If you come there on the landing page, you can immediately start up on a chat if that's what you want to do. We even have a feature where you can schedule a callback if it's not convenient and you want to schedule it ahead of time. Our agents have a way to access that and give you a call back whenever you've created some privacy for your chat. It also, across the top, you'll find the donate tab, you'll find the resources tab, you'll find the volunteer tab, anything that you need. It's all right there, recoveringfromreligion.org.
And of course, it's Gayle, Gayle.
I'm so glad you thought of that. Yes,
and I say it because I have issues. I have several issues, but one of them is so weird because I might think Gail or Gale.
Sure.
And sometimes with words, which is really weird because I actually like Italian better this way because almost every word in Italian spells like it sounds.
Right.
So, it's just kind of weird. I've never mastered spelling in English.
Well, I'm glad you thought of it because it is a different way to spell it. It's Gayle at recoveringfromreligion.org. So thank you for thinking about that.
Well, like I said, because it pops into my head because I'm like, I don't know how to spell that simple name. It's Gayle. Well, Gayle, thank you so much for taking time and short notice, everybody, in case I didn't say it earlier. I just threw out email to you or a text message on Facebook, and you said yes. So thank you for coming and telling us all about it.
Thank you for all the support that you have given to Recovering from Religion through the years. It's I'm so grateful that we have had this partnership and for your help, and I'm just delighted to appear, so to speak, on the podcast.
Well, thank you for being on the Phil Ferguson Show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
What did this person who made this world intend it for? And this is the point where you think, well, it fits me very well. You know, the caves and the forests and the stream and the mammoths. He must have made it for me. I mean, there's no other conclusion you can come to. And it's rather like a puddle waking up one morning. I know they don't normally do this, but allow me, I'm a science fiction writer. A puddle wakes up one morning and thinks, this is a very interesting world I find myself in. It fits me very neatly. In fact, it fits me so neatly, I mean, really precise, isn't it? It must have been made to have me in it. And the sun rises, and he's continuing to narrate the story about this hole being made to have him in it. And the sun rises, and gradually the puddle is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And by the time the puddle ceases to exist, it's still thinking, it's still trapped in this idea that the hole was there for it. And if we think the world is here for us, we will continue to destroy it in the way that we've been destroying it.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Special thank you to Gayle for being on the show. Greatly appreciate her and all the work that she does. Thank you, Gayle, again, for being on the show. Recovering from religion, if you're struggling, whether you're religious or not religious, you can call them and find someone to talk to, and they do a great job and help people through some tough times. Another quick reminder, earlier in the show I talked about what maybe someone who is struggling to get by versus a really rich person might do with $1,000. That's also sometimes described, trickle down is when you give the money to all the rich people because they're going to spend it and create jobs. Well, that's less effective than giving it to people that are struggling. So if you ever hear trickle-down economics, I'm not a follower of that philosophy either. Money needs to go to people that are struggling because they're going to spend it if your goal is to stimulate the economy. Another thought that's popped into my head here, if any of my clients are listening and they're wondering, what am I going to do to protect them in case the market goes back down like it did in March? I'm not going to do a damn thing. That's not how this works. This is buy and hold philosophy. You buy when the market's going up. You buy, if you can, when the market's going down. If you're in retirement or close to retirement, you should have an appropriately sized cushion. Often people will ask me, what is that percentage? I don't know. I don't know what that percentage is for you. If you're going to force me to give you a number, 30 to 40% in bonds is probably a reasonable place to start from, to look at. I am not very optimistic on very aggressive and long-term bonds at this time, so you might want to avoid those. So that means your cushion is going to be really boring stuff. Things making 1 or 2, 2.5%. Odds are they're not going to go up a lot, but odds are they're not going to go down a lot. So think about that. If you're really conservative, maybe half your portfolio in bonds if you're already in retirement. But on the other hand, if your annual expenses are small relative to your portfolio size, you can have fewer and fewer bonds. You can have a much smaller cushion. As an example, if you have $1 million and you only need 20 grand a year out of your portfolio, you could really be close to 100% stocks. If stocks on average pay a 2% dividend, that means they're going to kick out $20,000 a year in cash flow, which at the start of this example is what you needed, $20,000 a year in cash flow. If stocks go down, most of them generally will still keep paying the same dollars and pennies in dividends, so you're likely to still get close to that $20,000. If that makes you uncomfortable, and it probably does, then for you, maybe 10 or 15 or 20% in the cushion is okay. When my dad passed away at the age of 81, he was still 90% in stocks because he and his wife, my mom and dad, they spent dramatically less than they could from their portfolio. They always saved money. They always cut corners where they could. They got by. And even in retirement, when they had a bigger pile of money, they couldn't help themselves. They spent as little as necessary, even though they could have spent more. So it just depends on you. If you intend to spend all of your money while you're alive, take out a higher portion. If you tend or desire to give some of this money to your descendants, whether it's your children or nieces or nephews, siblings, people who haven't done as well as you can have a much smaller amount in bonds in the cushion because it's not really your money, even in your own head, if you're going to give it to somebody else. If you're 70 and you want to give it to someone who's 40, their investing horizon, with a little luck, is 30, 40, 50 years. Again, that pushes you more towards stock, more towards the long run. If looking at the stock market's up and downs makes you upset, stop looking. Stop looking. And if you get a big drop, add more money. Take advantage of rebalancing if you're not a client of mine. Most clients, we've already gone through this, but if you're not a client, take a look and make sure that the things that have done the best get adjusted down a little bit. And you put some of the money in things that haven't done as well. That's rebalancing. It creates a systematic approach where you sell high and buy low. Anyway, that's it for the show today. Show number 346. Of course, the coronavirus rages on, and hopefully you can stay safe and avoid getting ill. And I do hope some point in the future, I am now not expecting any conferences to happen in 2020. We will see still, but if they do, I don't know that I'm going. So maybe next year I'll see you at a conference somewhere and we'll have a good laugh about coronavirus being over because there's a vaccine. Fingers crossed. Until then, ciao.
Turning water into wine, so delicious. JC always does it right. That vicious, driving round in his ride, getting BS. Now I'm feeling so fly, like Jesus, like Jesus, like Jesus. Now I'm feeling so fly, like Jesus, like Jesus. Now I'm feeling so fly, like Jesus.
Give me that Momo, this. Give me that Chris and Chris. Ladies love my hair, and my cross is what they wear. Get them bottles popping. We got that faith and that love. Now give them 2 more bottles, cause you know I'm above. Baby, like hell, bad. Bring it up when seeing that girls around me. They be acting like they none. Baby, acting like they none. Seeing that girls around me. They be acting like they none.
Water into wine, so delicious. JC always does it right. That vicious, driving around in his ride, getting BS. Now I'm feeling so fly, like Jesus, like Jesus, like Jesus. Now I'm feeling so fly, like Jesus, like Jesus.